Anyways, we are starting biology today. Last semester, you learned some very specific things about biology and human heredity, and we're going to go over maybe one chapter or maybe two chapters worth of that stuff again this semester. But everything else is going to be about biology in general, all kinds of living things, not just humans. So, getting started for the semester, biology is the study of life. Bio means life, ology is the study of. The study of biology encompasses a wide scale of size and breadth and a huge variety of life, both past and present. We're going to look at things that existed millions and millions of years ago and things that exist today and how they're all connected. Diversity is a hallmark of life. As you know, all living things are very, very diverse. There's big, there's small, there's lots of colors, and then no color at all. There's a lot of diversity in just humans, much less the rest of the world. The diversity of known life includes about 1.8 million species that biologists have identified and named. But they estimate there's a total number of species range from 10 million to over 100 million. So there's a lot of stuff out there that scientists haven't discovered. And where they came up with that number, if they don't know how many species there actually are, I don't know. But that is what scientists estimate.
Miss Ruiz?
Yes.
Are we supposed to be taking notes right now?
If you want to take the notes.
Okay, thank you.
The notes are up to you guys. I'm going to go through them. You guys can fill in the blanks. I'll post a recording later today if you don't get everything. Unity in the diversity of life. Underlying the diversity of life is a striking unity, especially at the lower levels of biological organization. All forms of life have common characteristics. They're made of cells, they grow, they reproduce, they respond to the outside environment, and they need energy to stay alive. And there is a video linked in there if you want to look at it later. I'll show really important videos in class. That one's kind of a secondary video that gives you more information if you want it. But these 5 characteristics are very important to remember because all living things share these characteristics. From the interactions with the biosphere to the molecular machinery within your cells, biologists are investigating life at many different levels. We talked about one of those levels all semester last semester, and that was pretty much the DNA and the cellular level, but there's a lot of different levels to discuss. So we talk about the levels from smallest to largest on 2 levels, an ecological level, and then within a living thing. So the ecological level, you start at the organism, which is any living thing. And you move up to population, which is a group of the same living things. And then you move up to a community, which is all the living things, all the different living things. And then an ecosystem, which includes all the living and non-living things. And then the biosphere, which is the whole Earth. And we'll talk more specifically about ecology later in the semester, and we'll go over these levels of organization again. And then levels within an organism. So within you, you have all of these different levels. You are made of molecules and atoms. Molecules and atoms, different molecules and atoms make up organelles. Well, different collection of organelles make up cells. A different collection of cells make up tissues. Tissues make up organs. Organs make up organ systems. And a bunch of different organ systems make up the whole organism. The process of science. The word science is derived from a Latin verb meaning to know. And science is a way of knowing based on inquiry. Inquiry is asking questions. First thing scientists always do is ask questions. And science developed from our curiosity about ourselves and the world around us. There's two main scientific approaches. Discovery science is mostly about describing nature. That's when scientists go out in nature, they look at a pack of wolves and how they interact with each other and how they interact with us and other organisms out there. And then hypothesis-driven science. It's mostly about explaining nature. All of the medical stuff going on right now is all hypothesis-driven science. Science seeks natural causes for natural phenomena. Phenomena is a fancy word for an event that scientists observe and ask questions about. I don't know what happened. Don't do that. Uh-oh. I lost the notes. There we go. This limits the scope of science to the study of structures and processes that we can observe and measure directly or indirectly. The dependence on observations that people can confirm demystifies nature and distinguishes science from belief in the supernatural. In order to be science, you have to be able to see and measure it somehow. If you can't see it and you can't measure it, it is not science. Discovery science is based on verifiable observations and measurements. Like I said, you got to be able to see it, you got to be able to measure it. Observations can be either qualitative or descriptive, or quantitative, involve actual numbers and measurements. It can also stimulate us to ask more questions and seek explanations for the things that we observe. It leads to the use of scientific method and our next type of science. The scientific method is a series of steps that provide a loose guideline for scientific investigations. Every single science class that you have taken up to this point has probably gone over the scientific method. You make observations, you form a hypothesis, you do an experiment, you get results from that experiment and form a conclusion. And then the last step is theory, which is optional and very, very rare. Most modern scientific investigations can be described as hypothesis-driven science. A hypothesis is a tentative answer to a question, kind of an explanation on trial that hasn't been proven yet. Although we don't think of it in those terms, we use hypotheses in solving everyday problems, like figuring out why a TV remote fails. If you sat down to watch TV and you couldn't turn the TV on, you would have to figure out what's going on. So once a hypothesis is formed, an investigator can use logic to test it. A hypothesis is testing by performing an experiment to see whether results are as predicted. If the hypothesis is correct, we say the data from the experiment supports the hypothesis. If the hypothesis turns out to be wrong, it doesn't mean the scientist is bad, it just means they weren't correct in their hypothesis. So we say the data from the experiment rejects the hypothesis. And these words are very important going into your lab this week. So there's no traditional right or wrong answers in science. If a hypothesis gets rejected, the scientist just revises it and tries again. They don't get an F in the laboratory, they just do it over. So observation, the remote doesn't work. You question yourself, what's wrong? Hypothesis, the batteries are dead. Prediction, with new batteries, it will work. These are just an everyday example that people use the scientific method for that you don't really even think about. So your experiment would be to replace the batteries. If it works, we say the experiment supports the hypothesis. If it doesn't, we say the experiment does not support or rejects the hypothesis. And then you have to revise the hypothesis and start over. Parts of an experiment. You have the independent variable, the dependent variable, and the controlled variables. The independent variable is a factor that scientists manipulate or put into categories. It can also be known as the cause because there's always a cause and effect relationship in an experiment. You are trying to cause an effect. There will always be a control group as one of the categories, which is a group that does not receive treatment. This serves as the basis for comparison. In all the trials with the COVID vaccine, you always hear half the people got the vaccine and half the people got a placebo. A placebo is the control group. So they can compare the group that got vaccinated to the group that did not. There's always only one independent variable that scientists manipulate on purpose to cause change. The dependent variable is the part of the experiment that gets measured, or the effect. Scientists don't have any control over this. They're just measuring the effect. And there can be more than one. When people are getting the coronavirus vaccine, they're measuring their temperature, they're measuring their antibody level, they're measuring pain. And then the controlled variables is part of the experiment that stays the same. It's the opposite of the independent variable, and there can be more than one. So you only want to change one thing in an experiment to see if that one thing can have an effect on the dependent variable. Example. A researcher conducts an experiment to assess the effects of alcohol on people's sense of balance. The test subjects are all between the ages of 25 and 30. By the way, these examples are some examples that are going to be on your test. He divides the subjects into 3 groups. One group, the participants drink 1 ounce of alcohol. In another, they drink 2 ounces of alcohol. And in a third group, the participants drink soda or no alcohol. He then watches as each participant tries to walk a straight line from one corner of the room to the next and counts how many times they stumble outside the line. So in the chat, tell me, what do you guys think? What do you think is the independent variable of this experiment? The cause or the categories people are being put into? Anybody want to try it? Like I said, you're going to have these types of questions on your test in a couple weeks. So it is good to discuss. No, you guys want to do these on your own? There we go. Good. So allowing the amount of drinking. The alcohol is the independent variable. You got one group with 1 ounce of alcohol, one group with 2 ounces of alcohol. The third group doesn't have any alcohol. So 3 groups with the different amounts of alcohol is your independent variable. What is the control group of the experiment? Which group did not receive treatment? The third, yep, the one with the soda. People who drink sodas. Good, Shay. Good, Lily. The group that was given the soda is the control group. No alcohol. They did not receive the treatment. All right, next is a dependent variable. What is the effect that is being measured? What do you guys think? Trying to walk. Good, but what are they actually counting? What are they actually measuring? The steps. How many times they stumble outside the line? So the count of how many times they stumble outside the line. A lot of the time, the experiment, when it's being described, will tell you exactly what it's measuring or exactly what it's counting. So the dependent variable is usually the easiest to pick out. And then what is the controlled variable of this experiment? What is the same between all 3 groups? They're between 25 and 30. Good, so Lally, that could be one. Anybody see another one? So the age range is one. The task is another. They're all walking that same line. Yep, how are they? They're being tested the same. Good. All right, theories in science. So what is a scientific theory and how is it different from a hypothesis? A theory is much broader in scope, and the theories only become widely accepted in science if they are supported by an accumulation of extensive and varied evidence. Evidence, evidence, evidence. Something does not become a theory unless it has a ton of evidence. When we use theory in everyday language, we actually use it wrong. Scientists do not say, I have a theory. That word should actually be hypothesis. Because a theory is not just a random guess. Scientists build on what has been learned from earlier research. They pay close attention to contemporary scientists working on the same problem. Cooperation and competition characterize the scientific culture. Scientists check the conclusions of others by attempting to repeat experiments, and scientists are generally skeptics. They look at other people's experiments and research and say, no, I don't think that's right. I don't think you got that data. So they'll do the experiment themselves. And they either come up with the same data and they say, oh yeah, you're right. You did it right. Or they don't. And they got to keep running experiments. Science has a few key features that distinguish it from other forms of inquiry. It depends on observations and measurements that other people can verify. Scientists do not keep their methods a secret because they want other people to run the same experiments and get the same data and conclusions that they did. It means they were right. It also uses the metric system, even in the United States. If you're a scientist in the United States, you use the metric system. Meters, grams, liters, Celsius. It's one of the only professions that uses the metric system. And it requires that ideas or hypotheses are testable by experiments that others can repeat. One of your labs this week is about the metric system. We're so used to saying a gallon of milk or a pound of meat. Most of the rest of the world doesn't use those measurements. They use the metric system. Science and technology are interdependent. New technologies advance science. Scientific discoveries lead to new technologies. For example, the discovery of the structure of DNA about 60 years ago led to a variety of DNA technologies. Most of them we talked about last semester. Technology has improved, but it's a double-edged sword. It's improved our standard of living. It has kept people healthier. However, the human population has doubled to 7 billion people in just the past 40 years. And the environmental consequences of this population growth are devastating. There are too many people and the planet cannot sustain us, especially if we don't take care of it. There's a video at the bottom of overpopulation. You guys can watch that later if you want. Beware of pseudoscience. Pseudo means false or fake. A lot of people write under pseudonyms, fake names. But then science means to know. So the word literally means false knowledge, especially right now. There's a ton of pseudoscience and misinformation about the coronavirus and the vaccine and everything else. So these are scientific sounding claims that are not supported by trustworthy, methodical scientific studies. There's a lot of different websites dedicated to spotting pseudoscience. And a lot of it has to do with vaccines. A lot of people are afraid of vaccines because of pseudoscience, because people didn't listen to actual scientists with the actual evidence.